Really pleased to welcome Dr. Sile, who's going to be speaking on behalf of the organisation Sense About Science tonight. Just a little brief introduction. So Sile joined Sense About Science in February 2009 after a career in stem cell research. Sense About Science is a charitable trust that equips people to make sense of science and evidence, and it works to raise the standards of scientific debate in public life. As working in Public Liaison at Sense About Science, she was concerned with the use of science and evidence by civic groups, and she also coordinates the Libel Reform campaign. So I'll pass over to her without further ado, and I believe that you're happy to take interruptions and questions as we go along, so feel free to stick your hand up and make yourself known, and we'll probably have a more formal question and answer session afterwards. So over to Sile.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you everybody for inviting me to come speak today. It's really nice to see so many people out on the lovely crisp autumn evening. Can everybody hear me okay? I think I'll use a microphone so I'm quite softly spoken. As Kate says, I work for Sense About Science, who are a small UK charity who were founded in 2002 to help equip the public to make sense of science and evidence. We were founded by a man who's now the chair of our Board of Trustees, Dick Taverne, now Lord Taverne, lived up here. After the Lord's Science Technology Committee recognised there was a kind of anti-science atmosphere in the public. People were a bit worried after the MMR autism controversy, after the government perhaps mishandled the BSc crisis, and people were being mistrustful of science, and a lot of the science stories that were in the media were scare stories, and you can't trust these men in white coat kind of stories. So we founded Sense About Science to encourage scientists to get out there and confront these issues and get involved in controversial debates in the public, because scientists were afraid of being misrepresented and just not sure how to get their voices out into the media, when a lot of the time, for example, the debate about MMR and autism, the debates were usually someone from a single issue campaign group, maybe one scientist, and the scientists were feeling they weren't being properly represented. So they were quite reticent to speak out. So the first thing Sense About Science did, and they were founded in 2002, was set up a contact scientist facility where anybody can phone us or email us with a question about a scientific issue or a concern about something to do with science they've read in the paper or something in public debate. And we'll go to our database of scientists who support our aims and who work with us and try and answer that question. Now our database has about 4,000 members, from PhD students and postdocs up to Nobel laureates and ex-government chief scientific advisors in any field you can think of, I think. We haven't been stumped yet. And the kind of things people ask us are, I've got them written out on my sheet here. We've distilled this from our call logs and from our email logs recently, but there are kind of 4 things the public ask us about. They ask us to help us get to grip with something. So they ask us, should I be worried about this story about plasticizers in babies' bottles that I saw in the paper today? They ask us, how can I understand what I need from scientists? They ask, is this a scare story, or is this science? Is this someone's opinion, or is this something that's true? Is this safe, and who says this is safe? They ask us, how much do we know about certain issues? They ask us, what do scientists actually know about this? What kind of tests and studies have actually been done about this? And how sure are they when they're talking about this? People ask us about balance of scientific opinion. They may not ask us in those clear words, what is the balance of scientific opinion, but they'll ask us, is this the majority? How many scientists say this and how many say that? How are the scientists split? Where is the evidence in this debate? And they ask us about the legitimacy of the science itself that they've read about. Is this a proper study? How do you know it's a proper study? What have other scientists said? What kind of study actually is it? So a lot of what we do is responding to those inquiries that we get in on phone or email and going to our database of scientists to answer them. And we're always looking for more specialists. So if you're a scientist or specialist, please sign up to our database or email me or phone me and we'll add you to it. We also do more responsive work. So first thing we do in the morning when we get into the office or even in the train on the way in is read the newspapers. We read as many of the papers as we can. And we look through them for stories that we think we should respond to. Stories where science is being misrepresented in some way that will worry people, or stories where something's been written up badly. And we respond to those in a couple of different ways. We might phone or write to the journalist and ask them, is this really what you meant to write? It's not exactly that. Or, ask them how they're getting on and if they need some more help. Or we might put up a for the record piece. A for the record piece is something in response to a bad science story that will give public the science, the real science behind it. So an example of that recently was a story in the Telegraph which said, the headline was, shopping can make you impotent. And the story was about the kind of ink they use on shopping till receipts, a chemical in it that's been linked to lower sperm count in animals, I think. So we saw that headline, shopping to make you impotent, and thought, this doesn't seem right. So we looked into it a bit more, and we went to one of our experts who was an endocrinologist and asked him what he thought about it, and he told us, well, a couple of things. The pathway that chemical in particular will work through doesn't really make you impotent. It leads to this other outcome. It's a different pathway than they implied in the story. Anyway, you need to handle, it's a dose thing. You need to handle so many receipts in your lifetime. You need to get so much of a dose of chemical that probably wouldn't happen. So there are a couple of things that we could respond to. So we write up that scientist's words, in his own words, and put it up on our website with a very similar headline.
Can you talk a bit more slowly, please? I'm really finding it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I get my Irish accent takes over when I get excited about things. So we take what the scientist responds and tells us about that science and use their words and put it up on our website with a very similar headline to the headline that was in the paper. So for example, if the headline was, shopping can make you impotent, we might write, shopping doesn't make you impotent, or something like that. So if somebody searches the internet for shopping making you impotent, they find the Telegraph story probably, but they'll find the science as well. They'll find the scientist's response to it in the same search. There are other people who do similar things. For example, the NHS have their Behind the Headlines service, which is a kind of a longer term thing. They look at the actual study behind the story in the paper or in the press and write about what was in the study. So we respond to the story, they write about the study, and then people like Ben, for example, write weekly columns about maybe broader issues around that. So we're all pulling the same way and we're all covering up different things and working together. We also do longer term responsive work. So when we see that something is missing in the public debate about something, we respond to that. We try and fill the gap, or we try and figure out what the insight people need to understand this issue is that's missing. Or if we think we need to draw a line in the sand about something, we get experts together and produce a response to something like that. So we know something is missing in the public debate through our media monitoring, through looking at discussions on internet forums, looking at things being produced by campaign groups, things that are in ads and on flyers that people are getting through the doors. We look at questions MPs are asking in Parliament from their constituents, and more than anything, we look at our call logs and our inquiries and things we're getting in, and we see if there's any issue that keeps popping up, or if there's a misunderstanding and people keep expressing to us. We work with an awful lot of intermediary groups. So almost everybody we work with is somebody with an audience. So for example, MPs or lifestyle journalists, or groups of midwives, or health visitors, or farmers, well, the farmers, the NFU, for example. So groups of people who have another audience so they can talk to more people. It's a way of getting our message out a bit wider so we don't have to speak to every single person, and it helps just move things on. So we listen to what those groups tell us they are concerned about and the questions they're getting asked by their members, and we realise that something is missing or we need to respond to something. So it might be easier to give an example of that. So recently, well, about a year ago, around the time that Jade Goody was diagnosed with cervical cancer and subsequently died, we were getting an awful lot of inquiries about screening. And we were monitoring again the media and the campaign groups, and we realised that people out there were saying, why aren't more people screened for more things? We have a right to screening. Why can't I be screened for this? So we realised we were getting these questions. We saw campaigns being launched by newspapers, by tabloid newspapers especially, and by campaign groups and charities. And then we looked a bit further into it and looked at the discussions on things like women's magazine forums and parenting forums, things like that, and saw that there was a feeling out there that everybody should really be screened for everything, and there is no sort of nuance to that, no balance to it. And speaking to people like the Royal College of Pathologists and Association for Clinical Biochemists and other groups like that who work with people who run screening programs, we realised they were getting the same feeling. They felt that, yeah, there was something missing, that people didn't understand that screening everybody for everything was not an entirely good thing to do. So the next thing we did was ran what we call our nonsense meetings, where we get experts on the issue we're writing about in a room together and say, okay, people are saying everybody should be screened for everything. Sounds good, yeah? And they say, no, that's nonsense, that's no good. So we say, all right, what is it that you know that allows you to say that's nonsense, that's not entirely true? What's the insight that you have? And again, they told us that screening programs they'll always cause harm as well as have benefits. They're designed and evaluated as population-wide initiatives, and that individuals need to understand the balance of benefits and harms of every screening program for themselves when they make a decision whether to go for screening. And everybody isn't screened for everything, because for some people, for some parts of the population, the balance of harms would be swung too much towards harm and away from benefits. So we produced a document called Making Sense of Screening. I've got some with me today. And we think it's producing that and getting a lot of coverage for it and getting it out there to people like health visitors and nurses and GPs and women's groups and campaign groups. It reframed the debate. There are no longer, as far as we can see, not as many demands for more screening for more people, but people are talking now about the need for more evaluation and more research being done on screening programs, more money being put into evaluation and seeing who should be screened for what and looking for more precise and useful screening tests. And the NHS have withdrawn and are rewriting their breast cancer screening invitation leaflet as well. Other topics that we've tackled with this kind of document include GM and weather and climate, radiation testing as well as screening. And you probably already know that today is World Statistics Day, but also statistics. We worked with the Royal Statistical Society to produce Making Sense of Statistics, and that's how we produce all these documents. We work with groups of people who have an audience that can help us disseminate the documents, but also who know what the issues are, who know what's going on, and help us get to the actual insights into things. Another way we respond long term is with founding documents on how science works, because popularising scientific reasoning is at the heart of everything we do. It's helping the public have access to the tools that scientists have through the training that will help them make sense of the science stories they see and get involved in the debates on science. You don't need to be a gastroenterologist to get involved in the debate about MMR and autism, but you need to have a grasp of things like what's peer review and what's a good study and what's clinical trials, things, how science works, things like that. The first thing Sense About Science did in that field was to try and popularise peer review for the public. And that's something that scientists told us was an impossible task. The public don't need to know about peer review, which is that process of scientific publishing where a scientist writes up their research as a research paper and sends it to a journal, a scientific or medical journal, who sends it then out to some other scientists, some other experts in the same field, who assess it for significance, validity and originality. And who passes those three things, it gets published. But the peer review process isn't perfect. It's not so good at detecting fraud. But we are telling the public in this document, I don't know what to believe, that peer review is at least the first step. It's a distinguishing marker between something that is science and something that is somebody's opinion. So that was launched in 2002. And since then, I think we've had requests for about 250,000 of those documents. And they're being used by, another list to look at, they're being used by people in all different sectors in society, from media and press office, teachers, parliamentarians and in government, NGOs and medical charities, policy groups, community organisations, in the TV science programmes, on discussion forums, by museums, libraries, celebrities, publishers, the lifestyle sector, websites, and a lot by patient groups we know. We know that when people phone up patient group helplines and say, I saw this amazing new miracle treatment in the story about it in the paper this morning, how come it's not available to me? People at the other end of the phone use this document to go through the steps that we've written in there on how science works and how science and how peer review is with people on the phone, and help them make sense of whether it's something that's science, something that's just someone's opinion or has come from a campaign group or hasn't been published.